Hey, it's Packaging Unboxed. My name is Evelio Mattos. Today we're talking to Chris Wilson of Stckmn, a one-man agency. Chris, that's it. Nobody else. He does so much stuff. Illustration, packaging, video, photography. You name it, this guy does it, and he does it insanely well. We're going to get into the latest project that he's launched. It's all over the place. It's called the One Drop, which is a one-of-a-kind bottle of whiskey that doesn't exist anywhere else. Just one. That's it. And how you design packaging for that. Not only that, we're going to get into what it takes to run a one-man agency, how he got there, the work that he did in order to get there, studies, different jobs, all the different skills that he collected over a short period of time to launch this one-man agency, Stckmn. Second half of this is digging super deep into the One Drop bottle, from sketches to renderings to video to like the process of how they actually molded the paper fiber by hand. It wasn't on huge machines. It was one guy, a little bit of paper pulp, modeled it, carved it, shaved it. You can't even believe what they did to it. It's insane because this is, again, it's only one bottle that exists and it's beautiful. And if you're listening on Spotify or Apple or anything like that, do me a favor, hop over to YouTube because we're going to show some video. We're going to show all the different stuff that he's done, all the sketches, everything you need to see to believe what this guy's created. Let's get to the show. I've seen your work over years, like just posted on like the Die Line or LinkedIn or all these different places. I kind of dug into Stckmn and I realized it's just one guy. It's just you. So yeah. Chris, how are you? Where are you? And how did you get to do all this amazing work that you're doing by yourself?
I'm based in Scotland, Glasgow, Scotland. So currently in my studio in the city centre. It's just me. I'm just a one-man band. It's just, again, the name Stckmn's just tall, skinny guys. That's how the name came about. I don't have a team. It's very rare. My background's kind of industrial design. So I studied product design at university. And after kind of leaving university, realised there wasn't many jobs in the area or close to where I stayed that are specific to industrial design. So I kind of reinvented myself, starting to learn a bit more about branding, packaging, graphics in general, and just started trying to get into that side of things. So it naturally meant that I became this multidisciplinary designer instead of just doing specifically one genre or one discipline. I jokingly describe myself as a polyamorous designer because like I love all things creative and I'm not tied to a single discipline. It's more of a kind of flirtation with all the disciplines. So yeah, after I kind of realised there wasn't a job in specific to do with industrial design, I started branching out into different disciplines. Got my first job working with a tooling company. I was doing a bit of 3D and stuff with them. That then kind of led on to doing a bit of graphic work for them. Then they said, do you do exhibition stands? I was like, yeah, turn my hand to that. Do you do a wee bit of video editing? Yeah, I'll turn my hand to that. So it was this kind of constant learning within the first 2 years of working with that company. I got made redundant from there and moved on and got my first job working with a homewares company. And that was kind of like my first job as part of a team. When I worked at the tooling company, it was just me. So I suppose that was my first foray into sort of doing a bit of everything and being the only designer. Yeah. So I kind of like the idea of having that hands-on control over everything. Like, I don't know if it's a bit of this kind of manic, having to have hands on the steering wheel the whole time. So I got that first kind of experience working. I was there for 6 years working with a housewares company, and that was when I really got into packaging design. So I think my background in industrial really helped with that because of the structural aspect. So I was used to designing things, like doing technical drawings, had done a wee bit of 3D in terms of like CAD and things like that. So that kind of lent itself quite nicely to the structural aspect of packaging. Yeah. And then it was a matter of applying, like, how do I look at typography, graphics, and how do I apply that to the actual packs for print. So I've done that for 6 years, and there was a team there. Some of them were kind of more digital based. Some had surface design, some had graphic design. So I was almost leaning on them a lot of that time to pull some of their skill sets together. So again, this idea of continually learning and doing my best to kind of see what aspects of what I could take from them and add that to my own skill set. Left there.
Question yourself, Frank. I retire.
And got a job as a graphic designer, a junior graphic designer at a design agency in Glasgow. And again, typically with agencies, they'll deal with a whole host of different clients from different industries. You're kind of jumping off one job to another and doing a wee bit of everything. Like that expectation is that you're not doing one discipline or niching. So I'd done that, moved from junior to a senior designer, and then up to design director. So I was kind of one down for the top of the tree, effectively, working there at the agency. Done that for 2 years. And then it came a point where myself and my wife were discussing starting a family. And I figured, like, I'd been working nights and weekends doing freelance work anyway as Stckmn, and the client base grew and grew. And I figured this came a point where I've got this kind of fork in the road. I either stay on as design director and basically stay within that company and help it grow, or I take the leap and go out on my own and see if I could do it. So I've been doing that now for 8 years, full-time Stckmn. So yeah, that's kind of like coming out of university into where I'm at to now. And yeah, it's just me. I've went kind of full circle of coming out on my own, working 2 years, just me as the only designer, right through the path of working as like head of design with a team, then working almost at the top of the agency with a huge team across different disciplines, to now back just me, myself, doing a bit of everything.
Doing freelance, right? So a lot of creatives have freelance, they've got a full-time gig, all that, that's pretty standard. When you make the choice to leave a actual position to leap into your own agency, typically people do that like early on, not necessarily when they're about to start a family, right? Because like when you're about to start a family, like holy crap, like a whole lot of stress. So making the choice to go, forget that, I'm going to just do it all on my own. All right, let's take a quick second to talk about idpdirect.com. Go right to that website, download the design guides, the sustainability guides, the recyclable icon guide, which basically lists out all the different icons. It gives them to you in vectors. You can drop them right into your artwork right now, today, and go right into production. All right, back to the pod. Like how many clients would you say you had at that point?
Not a lot, but they were kind of repeat clients. So I was working with them. So I would say at that point, I maybe had 4 clients who I'd worked with over the years and within different capacities of them growing as a business. So coming in maybe at the beginning and branding them, working on an app design with them. And then I wouldn't hear from them for a while, where they go away and they'd push the business and grow it. And then they would come back. And that suited me because I was only really doing it at nights and weekends in between my full-time job, albeit burning the candle at both ends, trying to do like up to crazy early hours of the morning doing work. But so I'd say there was probably between 3 to 4 who were giving me kind of repeat, and they were overlapping, so it was quite nice. It was almost like a bit of pocket money out with the salary. But I think the reason being, knowing that I was going to start the family, I thought that if I had a child there, the likelihood is the safety net of having the full-time agency job and the decent salary, I would have never have went out full-time freelance. I think it was a now or never type thing, albeit really scary, because it was like you've got somewhere within a company and you're proud of where you are and there's a decent salary. Now it feels like a back step to a point, but I knew that if I was able to do it and get out there and sustain it for a couple of years, I thought, right, if I can do it, we'll see what happens. Worst case scenario, I go back and find another job. So that it was kind of more of a now or never forced into it approach, and just had to go for it. Yeah,
that's definitely like a scary point, right? Where you're like, holy crap, I can do this, which is comfortable, or I can do this, which is terrifying. And then I've got a kid coming on, which is even more terrifying.
Yeah.
So I talk to a lot of young students, a lot of young designers. Their biggest concern, like right now, is like it's so hard to find work. And like one of the questions that I kind of get into with them is like, all right, well, what's your expectation, right? Like, what kind of work do you think you're going to be doing out of school, and how much do you think you're going to be making? Right? And of course, the amount that they feel they're going to be making is way above what they should be, what a young designer is actually going to be making. And then what they want to be doing is they want to be doing like agency level work. But the reality is once you come out of school, like you came out of school, even though it was product design, like you went into a tooling company, you have to learn the ropes. So what would you say to like a young designer today that's coming out of school?
I went into the in-house approach, working for a private company, the tooling company. I'd say overall, one of the things to probably think about is that any job that you get where you're fortunate enough to be doing anything that resembles something to do with the creativity, whether it is, say you've studied industrial and you come out and you're doing a bit of graphic design, or maybe you've done motion in 3D, but the job that you've went for allows that at some point. But to begin with, you're starting out just doing maybe some other creative tasks that don't gel, but they have crossover. Because each of these roles that I've had, there's always been a point within it where if you can show that you've got enough determination and that you're willing to learn, and that you can almost transfer some of those skills. Every time that's happened to me within my career, there's always been doors that open through that. So you can almost craft the role for yourself by showing, look, this is what I can do as well. Is there a scope, or is there a project that I could apply that skill set to? So yeah, you will come out, and it would be great if everybody comes straight out of university and you land a job with Nike, or you Google or chapping your door to do these things. But in reality, that it takes time even, and I can't even kind of put those logos on my site to say I've worked with brands as large as that. But I think a big thing that it comes down to is not setting that as a, if I'm not there yet, I'm not good enough scenario. I think definitely, like, it took me 10 years working in the industry before I went full time for my own business. And I think there's having that experience and going through all of these other jobs, I think that gives you the wealth of confidence and knowledge, because you pick up a lot of things along the way that if you felt that you wanted to come straight out and be at that level straight away, there'd be a lot of hurdles you would come up against. There'd be a lot of mistakes you're going to make. There's a lot of, so I think going through that whole process of like starting off somewhere, crafting that job, and realising that you don't have to be somewhere a year, and if suddenly you don't feel where you are, you need to jump ship and go somewhere else. I think there's, especially nowadays, I think there's and I'm sounding my age now, so like I'll be 41 this year. So I think coming out straight away and just assuming that you should be at that level, or you're owed that recognition straight away, like that can probably really kill your confidence, because it kind of doesn't exist. Like, you see some of these people you would assume are like overnight success, but like pretty much most of them have got 8 to 10 years behind them before that happens. In some circumstances, I think if people niched out to say one specific thing, so say they're an illustrator who's got like a really distinct style, and they might get jobs with some of these bigger brands because they're booking them for that specific style, and they'll have the 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 followers, and then upwards of that, and you start to see them getting a name for themselves. And I think there's two kind of levels. There's like, you come out and you get the job, you kind of work your way up, you learn the trade, and then slowly, it's more of a slow burning approach. You get recognition, you start to know people within the industry, you start to network, people start to get to know who you are, you build a client base, and then basically the work starts to come to you. And predominantly 99% of my work is all through recommendation. I don't market the business as such, so I don't put out ads, I don't go to like networking conferences or anything like this. It's all through a client. I'll post about the work, I'll tag the client will then be, well, a good thing for this is LinkedIn, for example. Someone will see that I'm connected with someone else, they'll see a piece of work I've done, they're interested in that for their business, they'll either reach out to the common connection between us, or they'll contact and say, I seen you done work for so-and-so, could you do that for me? Or someone else will recommend me to them. So the majority of the work comes through that, like it's recommendation. And I think if I hadn't went through the process of working a lot of the years in the industry, getting to know these new people, networking the business, knowing other creatives who sometimes pass me work as well, I would have to be in a position where I'd have to be shouting about my work all the time. I'd need to be promoting myself, I'd need to be doing ads to really push that. So looking at someone coming out of university, obviously they don't have the benefit I have of time spent, like that time that I've spent in the industry. So I'd say there's a few kind of ways that they could go about it. they could reach out to some other creatives who are a wee bit more longer in the tooth and say, I'm just out, here's my portfolio. If you, maybe within your agency or someone you know has any work, or you can pass my name on, it'd be great. Is there any internships within your business that I could maybe come and sit and see how you do things? Like, definitely don't be afraid to reach out. I think now more than ever, it's a much easier time for people to find the heads of industry, find heads of creatives, find people high up within the industry, and be able to contact them directly. Like, back in the day, I didn't really have that. Like, we had the yellow pages, so we would look up phone numbers and try and call around, or it didn't exist. So I think it's much easier, but on the flip side, the competition's so visible nowadays in a way that it wasn't back when I was applying for jobs and things like that, because you would only really typically see other designers' work at end of year shows and things like that. You wouldn't necessarily be on your phone and see 1,000 different branded designs scrolling on your phone for an hour. So it's a very different thing. So the competition definitely seems a lot heavier for them. So what I was saying is, there's two kind of ways you can do it. Either look to get into somewhere that might not necessarily be strictly what you do, and then try and alter that role to fit what skill set you've got, or you could contact a company directly for what it is you're looking for, and just in the hope that they might have a position or something that you can fit into. Some of the benefits of doing that is, if you do niche in a specific thing, say motion design for example, then you could be targeting specific agencies that deal purely in motion. So in that way, you know at least the job that they're going to have you doing, you're confident in. So that'll show as well. And if you don't have a lot of work, maybe you only have a few examples that you've done as college or university projects, you can kind of tailor that towards the position that you're going for.
Everybody's concerned about sustainability today. What if I told you can take your pouches, labels, your single-serve wrappers, and make them completely dissolve, make them completely disappear in water? That's what the team at SmartSolve has done. They've got a paper that is certified flushable. You can actually take the packaging, put it in the sink, put it in the shower, put it in the toilet, flush it. It dissolves completely into fibers. Learn more about SmartSolve. Go to smartsolve.com and ask for samples. Now, let's get back to the show. LinkedIn is insane. The crazy thing is that when I talk to like younger designers, they are all against social media. They're like, we don't do social media anymore. That's not cool. Old people do that.
Yeah.
So that's one challenge. One is like, you got to get on LinkedIn. You got to post your work. You got to get seen. Yeah. Otherwise, there's no reason to complain that you're not getting work. People can't see you. They're not going to hire you. My question to you is, there's two camps. There's one camp where creators are like, I will never do free work. I will never do comp. I will never do that. And then there's the other side where they're, like, oh yeah, I'll do free work because it's going to lead to more work. Where do you fall in that? Like, would you do comp work if you don't have work, where you're developing things to put out there to potentially bring in more work? Or are you against that?
Well, I've done, when I started out, I would do like pitch work basically. So I've got a few ideas, speculative work, in order to try and either have something in my folio that would show that I had done that, or to try and gain work from a client that I maybe felt we were a good match or a good fit and I could do something for them. What I've done nowadays, it's more difficult, I think, because I suppose this is because it is only me as well. I'm really limited to how many projects I can take on, just because there's so many hours in the day that I have to be kind of picky about what work I take on and what I don't. So whenever I'm faced with that position where I've maybe pitched to a client, or they've came and asked me to do some work, and I give them a quote for the work, and they say, oh, listen, we don't quite have the budget for that. Like, I'm always happy to sit and say, well, look, what deliverables within that, or what things do you not need immediately? What could we take out to help reduce the budget so that I can do it? So then that way, I'm affording them the opportunity that we might be able to work together, but I'm not necessarily having to take the hit on unpaid hours. I've entered competitions before where there's no prize or no monetary value, but again, it's another great way of showcasing your skill and getting a bit of your name out there. I've never done internships or worked within an agency, like unpaid or low paid. I know that a lot of agencies do offer that, some better than others in terms of like the monetary value that gets associated with it. I'm a big believer that if you have any opportunity where you can kind of showcase what you do, then sometimes it's not always about the money. Like, I would definitely agree that as much as I don't feel people should work for free, there are occasions where it might benefit you. So like if you are doing that piece of work to as part of a test to showcase that you can do it, so that you then, if you're successful, you get a position out of it. Me personally, I would have no problem doing that for free, like because I think all you're really doing is showing that whatever you're saying you can do, you can, and if you don't, then you kind of rule yourself out for the role anyway. So, but yeah, I kind of sit in the fence a wee bit. It's hard because sometimes they can't do it for free, like in a situation that they've got bills to pay, a mortgage, a home life, a child. Like, so saying the time that you have there is valuable and it should be rewarded from a monetary aspect. But I'm a big believer that if you work hard and showcase what you can do, sometimes it's not always about the money. Like, I've had opportunities where the money's not been the thing that's drove me to do it. It's because I've been excited about the project. I've also looked at it from a perspective of, well, actually, that's quite a relatively big client name. That would be nice to have in my folio, and that could open the doors to other companies associated with it. So you're willing to be like, right, okay, I can take a hit on the budget because I know that it's worth it for me for my folio. So yeah, I've got no problem with like lowering my rate or if I see there's a value in it to me other than the cash value.
Then you have to you have to weigh it. It's not one way or another.
It's different, I think.
So Chris, because you're a one-man show, do brands expect to pay less because you don't have the overhead? Is that ever a conversation?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think it's strange. It's only up until probably the last year, I would say. So I've been 8 years full time doing Stckmn. About the last year, I've started to see what I would consider kind of larger brands. Like, when I look at my client listings, like, they seem quite large brands, or they've got reasonable budget to spend. Starting to come to me and to like. And seeing other large brands dealing with individuals or one-man, two-man agencies. In the past year, I've seen it slowly creeping to that point now where they're quite happy to work with one-man, two-man, three-man, like micro studios, as opposed to working with the larger agencies. And knowing what their kind of rates are, having worked there for a couple of years and seen the sort of the budgets that clients have for them, I know that I can still be paid really well and valued well compared to what they would normally pay the agency, but I'm delivering the same level of work as what they are. So I think with the larger clients, they understand that. So they go, okay, we might have paid 30,000 for this. If we go with Chris, we might get it for 20. But we know the quality is going to be the same. But for me, I'm like, well, that's great because 20 is great for me compared to what it was, like, say, 5 years ago. What I would have been charging would have been a lot less. But yeah, when I first started out, they would say things like, why is it that expensive? It's just you. You don't have a team. You don't. At that point, I never had an office. I've got a studio in Glasgow now. So like, they would say, oh, well, it's just you and a computer. Surely it shouldn't be as expensive as that. But again, I think that was just about educating the client on, well, I've been at this for a number of years. It's about the fact that I've learned all these tools. I have the tools. I pay for a lot of software. I've got outgoings. I think it's really easy for them to think that it's just me and the computer and that's it. I don't have things to pay for.
You're just in your bedroom, right? Clicking
away. Well, I suppose that's the way they kind of think of it. And for them, they possibly look at it from the point of view of, well, in comparison to me and an agency who's got 40 staff, obviously their prices have to be a lot higher to cover that. But in the reality, which is like the kind of the smoke and mirrors or the lifting the curtain, is that typically you would go in as a design director or the top, and you would meet us first. We'd come up with the idea. The idea then filters down to a junior or senior, then they execute it. So realistically, the client's paying for something to be executed by someone on a lower level than the design director. However, if they come to somebody like me, it is me they meet. It's me that executes the work. It's me that does the handover. So it's like at every point they're not going through this channel of, right, now you're dealing with account handlers. Now if they pick up the phone, it's me they speak to. And I think with some startup businesses and stuff, that's a nice thing. They quite like the idea of the kind of handheld approach where they'll come with an idea or a product that they've got that they want to take to market, and I'll sit with them right from the beginning, right through to inception, to the point where every touch point that they need for the business I've created with them. So there's a kind of strength in that, and a lot of the time when you explain it in that way, clients and customers really, like, they see the value in it. And I think the mindset, particularly like in recent times, is really changing for people. And I don't know if that is just because with the pandemic hitting, a lot of people becoming freelancers and going out on their own, and there being more of a global touch point with everyone, like we meeting up, like for example this, sitting on a podcast with yourself doing stuff like this. Like, I think there's a much more it's become more normalised. So them dealing with a kind of 1, 2, 3 man micro agency it just seems like the normal thing now. And I've seen a much more relaxed approach to that from the bigger brands, which can only be a really good thing, especially when there are a lot of people coming out, say, straight from university and deciding that they want to go out on their own, or they want to approach these bigger brands to try and get work. So yeah, I think it's changed, certainly from the way it used to be, that they wouldn't touch you if you weren't a 20-man team and had the big fancy office with a slide in it and stuff like that. So like, I think
right, you gotta have the slide, you gotta have the ping pong table, the foosball table that nobody ever plays because everybody's at work. They'll stand at the ping pong table for like the picture for the website, and then that's like the last time you play ping pong.
It just gathers dust. Dust the rest of the time.
So looking at your work, I've got one drop up on my screen. I've got a bunch of other pieces here that are insane. Before we kind of get into these, I kind of just want to hit like some quick questions. You're one man. Okay. Who does the billing?
Me.
Who does the invoicing?
Me.
Proposal, like writing the proposals?
Me.
Yeah. HR. Who does the HR?
Yeah, me. So if I'm out of line, I need to give myself into trouble. That's. Yeah.
If finding your spec data is a wild goose chase around your office, you've got a data problem. SpecRite is the only cloud-based management specification solution that every brand needs. Because if you don't spec right, you'll spec wrong.
So if you want to use the kind of the only drop as an example one, so there had to be more than just me involved in that in terms of execution from a production point of view. So like I said, I've got my background in industrial design. So in terms of taking it to a point where it was like technical drawings, how would it be sized? How would it function? How would it be manufactured? I could only take that to a certain point where I didn't have the ability to be able to tool the products or do any of that. So when it came to that, I worked with a company called Matter, who are an industrial design house. And it was a matter of leaning in with them and saying, look, I've taken it as far as I can. Can we now sit together and work on this to say, how do we take it from what is effectively some technical drawings and a Photoshop mock-up? How do we take it from that to a final physical piece that's in your hand? So where there's points within any project where there's something that's slightly more expert or advanced out with my skill set that I wouldn't feel comfortable tackling myself, I'll source someone else to kind of bring it. I mean, it's not often I do it. Pretty much most of the things, like I've turned my hand to a bit of motion design. I've been learning Blender for 3D. I do a bit of video editing. I've done storyboarding, graphic design, packaging. I do photo composites, so like retouching and composites for campaigns. I can do strategy design. I've done naming. So there's not much that if a client comes to me that I'm not actually executing unless it's really specific. So some of the 3D work that was on there, I worked with a modder, Dan Sim, on that. And on the short movie, I brought in a company called Wandering House that went to the locations and filmed all of the elements, and then I would sit on their first edit and would work through the edit together. But I'd storyboarded it all out, and I liaised and facilitated all the locations, getting all the people there. So I pretty much do everything that I can within it, like pretty much all of it. And then only bring in people if it's really specific, if it's something like I really can't do. Like if it was a really nice ornate illustration or hand-done typography or something, then I would probably source someone who specifically specialises in that, as opposed to me sitting with a pen fumbling through it.
Yeah. No, all right. So for if you're listening, you're not watching on YouTube, go watch us on YouTube. But if you're just listening, you've got a Scotch malt bottle. It's tall. It's a pretty standard style shape. There's definitely some customization that's happened on here, but then you also have like this wrap, and it's like a molded fiber wrap that goes around it, and it looks like the ripples of a drop hitting water. And then on the back of the bottle, there's like typography, there's a crest. There's a lot happening here, a lot of materials. The molded fiber itself has like wood shavings in it. There's a lot of layers in this design that as a consumer, you're going to see it on shelf and you're not going to realize all the depth of it, but it's communicating the brand in like such a way that you can't ignore this bottle. So what's the thought process, right? You've got a really simple brief here. It was basically you wanted to just compete. So how do you where does the idea come from? Like, how does all this come together?
Yeah, so the company that it was for was it's a brand called the Scotch Malt Whisky Society. So they aren't a distillery. So they, unlike a lot of the distilleries in Scotland, they don't distill their own whiskey. What they do is they purchase casks from I think 111 different distilleries. And what they'll do is they find the most unique and rare casks that these distilleries have, and they bottle it up. And then they have different venues in and around Scotland and some globally where you can sign up for a membership and you can go and you can taste and try and purchase these whiskies that aren't available anywhere else apart from through their society. So they have a core range of products that's constantly revolving, and there's an auction that happens once every 2 years in Scotland that raises money for charity. Mm-hmm. So they, in order to kind of compete with these big distilleries and these big household names, they wanted to enter one of their rarest casks into this auction to raise money for charity. And because they'd never done it before, and because they're a little lesser known brand in comparison to all of the whiskey companies, they decided that they wanted to do something really stand out, something totally different, something that would really capture their imagination and give them that same sort of standout that a lot of these bigger brands get through their brands that they pretty much hadn't done before. Yeah. So, I mean, it's like the absolute dream brief. It's like it lands on your lap and you're like, I can't believe it. So, and again, it was almost like this blank canvas. They'd said, we can tell you a wee bit about the whiskey that we've got, but basically we want you to go away and come up with these concepts about what you think we could do with it. They said there's only one stipulation, and that is that the bottle that it's going to go in has to be our core bottle that we currently use. So I wasn't able to change the glassware in any way. So it was just, that's what it is, come up with what it is and let the whiskey shine and get us the notoriety that we need.
This is a wild idea in and of itself. Were there crazier ideas? Like what were you trying to communicate beyond this drop concept? Was there anything else?
What I typically do at the start of most projects is I'll kind of dive into the brand or the company and feel it out and get a bit, try to understand a bit about them, their market, their competitors, what they're about, and then dive a wee bit back into the history of it, especially with whiskey brands and things like that. They tend to have like a kind of heritage. So it was trying to find, is there anything in here that kind of stands out to me that I feel could be something we could take forward that's ownable for them. So there was obviously the only drop, the one that we can kind of chat a wee bit more in depth about the processing stuff, but there was two kind of other ideas that were kind of floated to them as potential concepts for it. So the first was the company was looking at the founder. So the founder was called Pip Hill, and it was just basically him and this kind of band of close people he knew. They came across this kind of rare cask that they were able to purchase, and it was cask strength whiskey, so it wasn't blended, it wasn't watered down, it was the full cask strength. And they realised that nobody was really doing that. Nobody was selling it direct, these kind of limited casks. And also the taste that you get from a high percentage, high volume cask strength whiskey in comparison to some of the kind of blended whiskies is totally different. It's this kind of unique taste. See, the idea of the first concept, I was pitching this as like the epiphany moment. So it was playing on his kind of Pip, the name, and this idea that there was a moment in time where he had this moment of realisation that nobody was doing this, nobody tapped into this market of cask strength whiskey. So he was kind of trying to pioneer that, and the company was founded in 1983. So last year was actually their 40th year anniversary, and that bottle that you see just over my shoulder was another one that I designed for that. So the idea behind it was, he had originally, what he'd done was he would decant the casks into these old, like you would probably say soda bottles, and I've got one of the ones here that we kind of had. So it was like one of these old vintage kind of like soda bottles with the old tops and stuff like that. And what he would do is he would decant the whiskey into them, and then that's how we would distribute it to the society members. So they would just basically get one of these old bottles that they had, refill it, and then sort of hand it out. So I thought there's something really nice about that, about the fact that it's these kind of old vintage bottles. It was quite DIY at the beginning. So with that in mind, it was like, how could we almost like capture that moment in time? And I started thinking along the lines of like, now when you get amber, and you would have like a wee mosquito, and it would be like captured or suspended in this kind of moment. So the idea was to have the bottle filled with the limited one whiskey, and then have a casing that was acrylic cast, that the bottle would be cast actually within it. So that you can look through and you can see almost like the amber, because of the colour of the whiskey, shining through this clear acrylic, kind of capturing that moment in time. And within it, what I wanted to do was put like each member gets a small card that's printed with their name and their membership number on it. So it was to take the original one, the very first one that had Pip's name on it, and have that embedded into the acrylic as well. So it was almost like this art piece kind of celebrating it. And one of the other things was to replace the cork here with an acrylic cork, where we would put some malted barley inside the cork, so that again it's this idea of like all of those suspended moments from that time would come out. So that was one of the other concepts that got put forward. A secondary concept to that was looking at the actual society building, the vaults in Edinburgh. So they've had it since the 18th century. It's quite an iconic building. It's actually on the monogram. So this is one of their bottles, their mainstream bottles that you can purchase. So you can see the monogram there. That's the actual kind of stylized version of the Vaults building. So I figured if there was a way that I could incorporate that, but sculpturally, into the bottle itself. So one of the stipulations of it were that I had to use their glass. So that's like the kind of bottle, the shape. I wasn't able to change that. However, most of the other distilleries and the big whiskey companies that enter the auction, they would get a hand-blown crystal one-off glass made. So they had much more option in terms of the sculptural aspect, where as I basically had this base and had to add something to it, as opposed to... So I figured, was there a way that I could do that? So I thought about this idea of representing the entrance to the building on the bottle. So at the base, it would have a 3D printed doorway that the user, like the consumer, could actually open at the bottom, and we could put a message on the inside of it, like "Welcome to the club" or something like that, to kind of almost take the experience they have physically at the vaults and put this into the bottle. And the wee windows that would go up the bottle would be like a high varnish build. So it would be kind of like a kind of spot UV effect like this. So that was one of the other ones. It was like the history and the founder, the actual vaults, which is their spiritual home, and then the third option, which was the only drop, which is the one that's got the droplet. And the kind of main thinking behind the one for the only drop was there is only one one bottle of this specific liquid. Like it will never be repeated. It only exists once. So the only drop was this kind of idea of like the hero in the liquid itself. So, and then it was how do we celebrate this marriage between the cask and the liquid? So like, if you take them separately, the liquid's just like a rye. It's just like it doesn't have the flavour, the craft, the years of kind of flavour that you get from it. Whereas in the cask is basically just a wooden cask. It doesn't have, but if you unite them in that kind of marriage over those 33 years, you get this beautiful thing at the end of it. So it was like, how do we like get that across in a packaging, get across that it's a one-off. And the idea was that it was this kind of reuniting of the cask with the liquid. So that was kind of the idea. And it was originally, I had played with the name Uska, which is Gaelic for like water of life. And this idea that obviously the whiskey can't be anything, it needs water. That's like one of the main ingredients to kind of make it. And this idea of the droplet filtering down. So that was the original name. But then we were thinking of like translations and stuff. And it seemed a bit too far in terms of like the naming of it, so it ended up kind of coming back to the only drop as the kind of final name for it. And like I say, the concept was that by taking this kind of outer, so again I had to add something to it. So it was like, how do create a sculpture that can somehow be applied to the bottle that has this high impact thing from a distance, and it's kind of linking art to whiskey to celebrate this craft idea. And and then from that, it was, well, how do we actually literally take the cask and reunite it? So that's why the idea was to take these shavings from the actual original cask and then embed them into the paper pulp sculpture again, so that you would literally reunite the cask with the liquid when you place it back onto the bottle. So that was kind of the idea.
If somebody that's not in packaging and not in design is like listening to this conversation, they're like, what the fuck are these guys talking about? You know, like this is so romantic. Like from a design standpoint, like you're pulling back like history, you're bringing it forward into like this new tech, you're blending these materials, and it's like, it comes together into this beautiful piece of art. What's a bottle like this cost to purchase, not to make?
Yeah, so it went to, so again, the unique thing about this as a project was, unlike this going as a mass-produced product where you would get multiples of it, there only is one. So it went to auction. So the Sotheby's Auction House, in partnership with the Distillers One of One, put it on auction. It sold for £15,000 ticket price, and then commission on top. So the total value was £18,750. I think it sold at auction, and all of the money for that goes to charity. Like, so it goes to the Youth Action Fund.
Wow, that's crazy. That's crazy. And you never got to taste it.
And I never got to taste it. So you've probably seen that the bottle comes with a 10 centilitre miniature, and that was to allow the buyer to sample it without having to open the main bottle. Yeah. So that they would be allowed to they could have a taste without actually having to open the actual one.
Okay. So then as I'm like, I look through the site, and you can go check this out at stckmn.com, stckmn.com. It's showing your sketching. Now, you went to school for product, industrial design. Like, you know, you have that sketching background. Do you still sketch with every project?
Yeah. Everything starts with a piece of paper and a pencil. Like, no matter what it is, if it's a logo, if it's me, even if I'm doing photography based stuff, I'll be scamping out like the set or where the object should sit, layout, composition. If it's video editing, I'll be storyboarding. It's always pencil to paper before I do anything, and that's across any of the disciplines that I do.
I love the picture of your sketching on here because it shows the super rough sketches, right? Which I think it's funny because like a lot of times designers that don't typically sketch, like they'll have a similar quality of a sketch, but they'll feel embarrassed to show those. And it's like, no, like it's fine to be super real. Like the whole point is just to get the idea out on paper and be like, hey, look, this thing opens like that. And the customer can be like, nope. Or yep. Like they can say they like it or they don't, or, it matches or doesn't. You can have a conversation over like a really, really rough sketch. It doesn't have to be a beautiful sketch like the one that you're showing next to it where, it's like finished. It's like, you're just trying to convey something to someone that doesn't hear things visually, right? They can't visualize what you're saying. So it's like, here's the kind of the general concept. Plus it helps you too. I know for me, like sketching, I'll put together a sketch and I'll be like, that's a terrible idea, but at least I put it out there and now maybe I like one aspect of it or another aspect of it. Yeah. What's your sketching process?
Again, it depends what the product is about. But for this, it would be, and I can share some stuff that you can overlay some of the kind of sketching stuff. But for this one, what I originally done was like a kind of illustrator outline of the bottle, just the shape, the kind of outside profile, and printed that on sheets of paper, just 4 up, and then all I would do was just sketch on top of it, and just really rough, like just trying to find contour lines, show shape, kind of roughly get the idea and proportion and layout. Should it be 4 windows, 3? Like, where should it sit? Like, it was really just playing with the basics of throwing some shapes down and seeing what kind of worked. And I think that there is always this, and I was very much like this at university, and I had to have my tutor like really like scream at me to stop doing it. But I would be sitting agonizing over every line and trying to make it so perfect, and it was like, you need to stop that. Like, when you're in that process, you're just trying to get a feeling across or a flow. You're just getting into a state of like, it doesn't matter, it doesn't have to be nice, just throw down as many like fast and dirty sketches as you can, because you'll get closer and closer each time you're doing it, rather than I was getting and sitting for like an hour trying to do like all these beautiful all the line weights and everything. It's like, that's pointless, because just get really fast and loose with it, and because you'll find that's when it's kind of best. So for this one, started off kind of doing that, and then what I would do is I would look through, basically after a big kind of session sitting, I would look through what I had, and like you say, I would start to say, right, that's quite nice, this kind of works, maybe that doesn't, and then I would focus in on those areas and start to do sort of cleaner sketches that maybe looked at layout and spacing, and then once I kind of had them kind of loosely, I would scan them, or I would take a picture of my phone and put them into Illustrator, and then start to play graphically with some of those elements and actual like geometry to see, right, what works, what doesn't. Because I think it's really hard, like if you show clients the rough and ready kind of sketches and stuff, it can scare some of them off, because they maybe don't have the ability to see it from that to like a kind of finished thing. And especially when you're sitting on a table with this kind of setup, I think it was like 10 people around a table, and I'm trying to express to them what this concept is. I had to almost take it to like photorealistic, like I was using different textures and materials to produce these mock-ups to show almost like the finished thing, or roughly what it would look like. And I think by taking that barrier down, it helps them not have to think too hard about what it might look like. Because I think if you just showed them the sketches, they'd be thinking, what are we paying this guy for? Like, these are terrible. Like, it looks like a 5-year-old's sketched them. So, but yeah, so that's pretty much the process. I would then start to refine it, and then actually took these ones into...
Sorry, do you take those 3 concepts, like the amber, the other one, and this one, and you take those to photo quality renderings and show them?
Yeah, like even then, there's elements of it that are still quite loose. Like some of the hand sketches made it into the presentation, and again, I can share them with you if you want to kind of show them while we're speaking. But you'll see some of them are a wee bit more refined than the other ones, and it's just because I had to kind of do that to convey it. Where I'm showing some of the 3D printing parts that would be put onto the bottle, they're very rough, just sketched out to kind of get the idea. And then one kind of key visual that I spent a bit longer on in Photoshop, and all I did was overlay onto bottle renders that they previously had, so that made it easier for me to just kind of move the parts about onto that. But I presented the 3 of them, and again, I think a big part of this is like, if I was to go into those meetings without the storyline or the narrative behind each of the concepts, it would be really difficult for them to make a decision as well, because I think a big part of it is how they market the product. So if you don't have a storyline or a narrative or something flowing through the reasoning why the design's the way it is, it's just a design. Like if you were designing for design's sake, it just has no purpose. Right. So having that concept or that thing they can buy into is really important. So that's and as well for me as a designer, it's really important because it helps me through that process, because I have something I can always go back to and think, right, am I telling that story correctly? Is this the right way to do it? Like that almost guides me while I'm going through that process.
Yeah. And then for the person that ultimately buys this, there's this story that they can feel, that they can see, right? Like that's the whole.
Yeah.
Like, does it speak clearly? Mm-hmm. So because this one was a one-off bottle, you've got the round drop. You said that was a UV. I don't do glass bottles, so is that something that's typically done on bottles? Like you can do a UV, or was this something that was just specific because it was only like a one-off, or you're doing a few bottles?
No, like people do it on labeling and stuff like that, where they'll have this basically just like a high varnish build, like a high build varnish. So it just gets layered and layered to the point where it comes up as if it's like a.
And that's right on the glass, right?
Yeah. That's just basically like a spot UV or a kind of varnish, and they build it up. So it does get used like as a process. People do use it on glass, typically not as like something where they want it to appear almost invisible. Mm-hmm. There'd be a graphic and then they put it on top of it, sure. Or there'd be an element where they place on top. One of the kind of restrictions we may not been able to change the glass would have been that could have effectively been done in mould. So if they created a tooling or a mould for it, they could have blown the glass and that could have been applied. However, because I had to use what they had, like the off-the-shelf bottles that they already had, I was trying to think clever about how I could create that effect, but within the capabilities of the manufacturer. And I suppose that is one of the difficult things when you're designing something for a one-off. Trying to find suppliers who will engage with you and can fulfill that, because they're used to coming and saying, right, okay, we're going to do 100,000 of these, so they would have machine setups, tooling costs, things like that. But when you're only doing one, you're quite restricted to who will work with you. Like, it was quite difficult to try and find, and that kind of almost as well that kind of depicted some of the processes, like the choice of some of the processes, because of from a cost perspective, but also from a timing perspective. So yeah, that definitely being the one of one does throw up a lot of challenges that if it was probably a mass-produced product that had multiples, it would have been easier. Because I think if we had went down the route of doing the paper pulping for a mass-manufactured product, the tooling cost would have been about £25,000 for one tool to do those parts. Yeah. So that's why what ended up having to happen was it was more of a kind of contemporary and traditional method combined to create that one-off sculptural sleeve. Because we couldn't go down the route of spending £25,000 on a tool that would only produce one sleeve. But in the end, it actually worked really well because it helped tie into the story of the craft behind it. So, like, the idea of whiskey being this craft in itself, like people choosing which whiskey, what cask to put it in, the amount of man hours that goes into that type of thing, like being able to reflect that in the way that this was constructed by having the actual parts themselves. So the paper pulp was all made by hand from the pulp mixed with the water. The small cask shavings were placed into this. It was then placed into moulds that were then dried. Yeah. All of the decals that were applied to it were all hand applied. It was actually like a two-piece that was glued, so like again, hand done. So it actually, in reality, the process was actually a really good fit for telling the story and almost aligning quite well with the craft aspect of it. Whereas a kind of metal tooling or a mass production process probably wouldn't have done that in the same way. Yeah,
that's great. So, like on the site, you're showing like their hand debossing this thing. Like
Yeah.
there's a tool, there's a hammer, that's great. So it's like super, super custom.
Yeah.
Which is, as a designer, it's like, I don't know, that gets exciting because it's like, okay, this isn't mass produced. Like we can get back to like the actual craft of hands-on. Then like if I look through the design, I don't know, my favorite part is the little line at the bottom where it's like only 1 gram left. It's like there's, this is a $20,000 bottle of whiskey, but there's a little bit of humor that kind of comes in, and that's what I think. It's not like the biggest part of it, but it's like one little detail where it's like, all right, this is pretty cool.
Yeah, so I come up with that line and place that in. The society themselves, their tone of voice for the brand is quite jovial, like it's quite tongue in cheek, and it was trying to think of a way of incorporating that somehow into it, but also playing into this idea that you're kind of scaremongering that they've only got one left. It's like it's so limited that you're onto that kind of last one. So I thought it was quite a nice way of adding a wee bit of personality into what is quite a kind of, it's like an art piece. It's quite sculptural, so it feels quite elitist, and there's only one. So it was like trying to say, how do we claw that back a wee bit and add a wee bit of humour into it. So when I'd actually put that, it got a laugh in the presentation when I proposed it, and straight away they're like, we're keeping that, like we love that thing. It's actually they've actually moved it onto the 40-year-old one that's over my shoulder. They've incorporated it into that bottle as well to let them know that there's kind of like this dram left, because again that was a limited run of I think 130 bottles, and that's all there'll ever be of that. So they loved it so much they actually incorporated it into it. Yeah, so I think sometimes it's nice to be able to think a wee bit differently and put my own thoughts forward with it, to say, look, I've got this idea, like is that something that you'd be interested in? And it was well received, which was great.
I always tell young designers, like if I'm working with them or I'm teaching at a school or something, it's like copywriting is so critical. Like I think a lot of times a young designer will be like, all right, well, this is the copy that I was given, and they try to crowbar it into all the different positions, and maybe it's not communicating, maybe it's not working. Like you can work with what you have, and then you can do an option B, and you can take some freedom with a copy. You can add copy to it. Like you can put a little bit of personality that makes sense for the brand into it. And had you not put this in, had you not put in only 1 gram left, this still would have been an amazing piece. But the fact that you put that in there, and you got a chuckle out of the group, and they loved it so much, now it's part of the brand. Like this wouldn't happen without your copywriting, right? They are now, as a client, they're a little bit more endeared to you. They see, okay, not only are you doing design and photography and like all the things that you do as Stckmn, it's like now you got copywriting in there too.
Yeah, I know. But I think it's a nice thing. Like, for me, I think it should always be kind of part of the process as well, because I think you can deliver so much of what the brand's about and its personality through that copy. So if you're there and you're faced with the challenge of coming up with a visual representation of the brand, so whether it's the logo, the visual style, the packaging, it only seems fitting that you should also contribute to how it speaks to you, like what you're reading. And I think more and more you'll see that with a lot of brands, where a lot of the personality does come through the copy. Like a lot of their campaign, their advertising, their marketing's big on how they express that copy. So yeah, it's definitely a kind of, I would say, people are maybe getting better at realising how much of an important part it is within the industry. But it's for me, it feels like it goes hand in hand with the process.
If a client comes to you and they're asking for a project, and maybe it's something that you haven't done, or there's a portion of this project of something that you have not done, will you take on the project and kind of learn and figure out how to do that part? Because you're doing everything. So like, what's one more thing? How do you know how far you can push yourself in learning something new, or like, all right, I'm going to bring somebody in to help me with this?
It's a hard question. I think what I do is I a way of obviously like that kind of yardstick of should I take that on, could I do that or could I not, is that if it's something that leans into something that I know a small percentage of already, the likelihood is I'll say yes and learn the bit I don't know. So just to give an example, if it was like I've been trying to learn Blender, so doing like a lot more 3D stuff. So I can model things up, I can do the labeling, the lighting, get it to kind of semi-realistic stage. Whereas if a client asks, can we animate that? Can we have it spinning? Can we do it? Like, I don't know enough about it, but I reckon I could learn enough that I would be able to do it. Like, two of the biggest things for me is YouTube and Skillshare. Like, I'm like a lot of my downtime goes on maybe kind of researching a lot of that. And if the beauty of it is, if there's a very specific thing, so it's like rotating product, you just type rotating product, there'll be like a plethora of like tutorials on how to do it. So I think as long as I'm comfortable that it's kind of already within my wheelhouse, then yes, I say yes. But I also, one of the advantages I've got of kind of like having a good network around me, I'll always probably have someone that I could typically have as a fallback if I can't do it. So like if, for example, I decided to say, okay, yes to that animation project, and I'm halfway through and I'm thinking, I really don't know how to do this. I've got people that I could reach out to, like the guy Dan who worked on the Only Drop with me, and say, Dan, I've got it this far. Can you come in, pick up and take it to here? How much is that going to cost for that? And it would just be a matter of me taking the hours that I would have been paid for that and paying him to do it. So the client, and I would be transparent with the client as well. Like I wouldn't be saying to the client, I done it when I haven't. I would explain to them that I've brought someone else in to do that and we're working collectively, because I see at the end of the day, clients typically don't mind whether it's you doing the whole thing, a part of it. See, as long as the result is that they're happy with what's there, and it's not cost them any more money, they're typically quite happy. So, most things I'll try and take on if I think it's within my wheelhouse. If I feel like one thing I don't do and I don't touch it at all is coding. So like website builds, like development. It's just I've tried over the years to get into it and try to teach myself coding, but it's not something I enjoy. I think that's a big part of it as well. If I enjoy it, I'll be pushed to learn it, and like I really enjoy the process of learning it. Whereas coding, anything to do with coding or the tech side of it, it's not my thing. It doesn't excite me. So yeah, I definitely bring someone else in to do that side of it. That's not my thing. But I think it's a lot of people now. It's difficult, especially younger graduates coming out looking for jobs. There is this expectation that you need to know so many skills. Like it used to be a graphic designer, you'd be doing design for print and maybe a bit of packaging. Now it's like you need to be doing a bit of motion design. You need to be able to do a wee bit of 3D. Like, can you do some video editing? Like, there is this expectation that job description just seems to be getting bigger and bigger for people coming into the industry. And I don't know if that's because the tools are making it easier. Mm-hmm. The tools are making it a lot more accessible to people, that there's this expectation that you kind of have to be able to do like more than just one thing. But that can be dangerous as well, because it sets a precedent that people think they've got so much to learn and so much to do, and rather than some people who might be quite comfortable just doing one thing but really well.
What do you think about AI?
That's a hard one, because where it affects me most probably would be with the photo compositing and the photography retouch and stuff that I do. I see it's coming on leaps and bounds in terms of like the way it was a few years back to now. It's like sometimes if the prompts are good enough, it's indistinguishable between real photography and AI. Yeah. But what I've been trying to do is lean into it a bit. So rather than be scared and think it's not for me, and almost take on that approach where, like Kodak done when they thought digital cameras weren't going to be a thing and they kept filming, and we know how that, I mean, or it's had a resurgence now. They've played the long game. So rather than being like, no, it's going to take my job, I don't want to do it, I'm actually leaning into it, and I've been trying to learn a bit of Midjourney. So I've been looking at how to do the prompt engineering and stuff like that. Just because I'd rather be aware of it know how I can potentially use it as a tool, rather than being kind of scared off and kind of run the other way. But yeah, I mean, there's obviously elements of it that are now, it's just part and parcel of most softwares you use now. I've all got it, so it's. I don't think it's going away. So I think we're better to lean into it than fight it.
Yeah, no, that's cool, man. So as we start wrapping up here, you know, you're a one-man show. I know, like, for creatives, like there's like this hustle culture of like, man, I'm going to work so hard, I want to keep going. You know, you've got amazing clients, you've got amazing work. Do you ever feel like you've overdone it? Like, man, I've taken on too much work.
Yeah, I mean, classic example was in October of last year. So I had been working on the two whiskey projects at the one time. So I think the project lasted about 6 months in total across for both, which was like a really, really tight time frame just for any type of project. Like, and to have so many working parts in that was a lot anyway. But to have then said, I'm going to do a short film, I'm going to do the 3D, I'm going to do the photo reach. Like, it was, I just took on probably too much, to the point where I was really stretched. But when I was in it at that point, it was like I had blinkers on. It was just like, get the work done. Like, I didn't see that, like, round about me, like, everything was kind of falling apart. It was like I was working late into the evenings, like going home and reheating my dinner, things like that. I was skipping meals. It was affecting my home life with my wife and my son, because I was just so consumed by work. And it got to a point in October last year where I started getting a kind of pain in my chest and down one of my arms. And I was like, right, this isn't normal. It's like my body's way of telling me, right, you need to slow down. I had put it down to just because I hadn't been eating well, and I figured it wasn't anything serious. But then I was walking to the train station, started to get a pain in my chest, and I couldn't breathe. So I went up to the hospital, and they said to me, yeah, took me for scans, done a chest x-ray, and they noticed there was a kind of darkening in one of my lungs. But what it came back was that, and my blood pressure was high. But what they came back and said, you've basically had a bad chest infection. You've not given your body time to recover. You've just kept working through it. I had lost like 2 stone in weight. Which isn't great for a skinny guy like Stckmn. No. Like a skinny guy like me, that's not great. Be fading away. So yeah, so my body was just like, it was really bad. And it was just a kind of wake up call of, right, I really need to watch what I'm doing here. I'm burnt out, really. Like, it was just too much. So between the kind of October to Christmas and then at the start of the year, I've just been trying to be much better in terms of managing client expectations on projects, better project management, trying not to take on as much as I have been. I've dropped down to a 4-day week, so I don't work on a Friday now, just to try and kind of carve out some time back for myself and not be as full on. So that's again, I think it was this communication thing as well. I put out an email to all my clients and just said, listen, things like phoning me at night, contacting me across WhatsApp, like, it just felt like a 24-hour, I was accessible to everybody all the time. And like, you just can't do that. Like, I think there is definitely this, like you say, with this kind of hustle culture where it feels like if you're not working and not doing 20 different things and have 5 things on the side and all that you're somehow not achieving things. And it can be really hard, especially when you're on social media or you look at things from the outside and you're like, oh, why am I not getting here, or why have I not done this, and not achieving kind of these milestones that that you do. You throw yourself foolhardy right into work and it consumes you. But it can be really dangerous, because like things like that with your health, how it's affecting you, your even my mood as well. My mood had changed so much, like just short-tempered and things like that, because of just the stress of it all. And you don't notice it because you're just so consumed. And it's when other people start saying, listen, this is unhealthy. Like, when your body's telling you you're going to hospital, this is unhealthy, then you kind of need to stop. So yeah, I'm trying to be better at that and try to find a better work-life balance, because it's like, all joking aside, I don't want my tombstone to say like great, delivered a great whiskey project. Do you know what I mean? It's like, or great at Photoshop. It's not worth it. At the end of the day, it's work, and it shouldn't be affecting your personal and physical health like that.
Yeah, no, 100%, man. You don't want your tombstone to say, great at making bottles or great at Photoshop. Like, you're right. There's so much more to life, and when you're in it, it feels like the project is everything. But definitely take a step back. If you're out there and you're listening, you're like, oh my God, I can relate to this. I can feel this, but the work is so important. There's a lot of work out there. There's always going to be another job.
Yeah.
There's more to it than just hustling. So definitely give yourself a break. Chris, man, thank you so much. I'm a huge fan of Stckmn. Go check him out, stckmn.com. I hope we can keep in touch. We didn't get a chance to talk about music, but we'll definitely get a chance next time.
Nice, man. We'll maybe share a few playlists or something. But I just wanted to say thanks so much, man. I really appreciate you having me on. You've got a cracking channel. Anyone who's wanting to listen to the packaging side of it, processes, clients, all the stuff that you've got in there is a wealth of kind of educational stuff for people to really learn. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much for having me on.